humbling it is to think that Kyle and I can gather really what is the who's who of Central Denver owners together for one night, one event. Watching you guys all talking, a little nervousness came over me as I thought, you know, if owners start talking to owners, who's going to need brokers anymore? Though, also felt, you know, we may need to kind of break up a few arguments and whatnot as some of you finally are meeting one another and realizing who you've been competing against for properties over the last 5+ years. But thank you all for coming. Tonight, we're very pleased to have Keith Erffmeyer with us. Keith is the newly appointed Denver County Tax Assessor. I'll be introducing him shortly. But tonight would not have been possible were it not for the help Kyle and I get on a daily basis from our team. Many of you that have worked with us know Valerie Latham. She's our transaction manager. She's our marketing director. And now she's wearing a new hat of event planner. And so Valerie, I just want to say thank you to you for all your hard work. Anna Malnati is our administrative assistant. She's been with us for almost a year now, and I just want to thank you for all of your work. Thank you. And would also like to recognize Laurel Rossi and her team from Stewart Title for being here tonight and being a part of our events. I did my first deal at Stewart Title almost 12 years ago. A couple weeks ago, Kyle and I did our most recent deal at Stewart Title, and just about everyone in between. And we just appreciate what you do, not only for us, but for so many of these folks. And thanks for coming tonight, ladies. And there's also two other ladies here tonight that I was really looking forward to a lot of you meeting. They're the reasons Kyle and I do what we do. Yeah, John, please bring them around the corner. Our wives, Carrie Johnson, my wife, and Courtney Malnati. The two who really put up with us on a day-to-day basis. But before we bring Keith up, I had promised that we'd kind of start on a positive tone, remind everybody what we are here really to celebrate. And that's what's been happening in the Denver market over the last 4 or 5 years. I mean, it's been an unprecedented level of growth in property values. For those of you, all of you who continue to own property, it's wonderful news up there. I know some of you who have been buying in the last 18 months can't believe what you're doing to yourselves as you continue to push prices higher and higher. But, you know, the market is terrific. Rents are at unprecedented levels. Vacancies still remain below 5%. Even the new construction is leasing up without skipping a beat. Investor interest not only in town, but the folks that continue to come to Denver for investment from other markets is incredible. And these prices are, you know, all-time record high. For Kyle and I, 2014 was a record year for our career, the best either of us have seen in over a decade in this business. We sold $52 million of Central Denver apartment buildings and development sites, and for that we want to thank so many of you that we were blessed to do business with in the last year, and look forward to doing more in the coming years. Our idea really for tonight's event comes out of that. We really wanted to do something that could be a client appreciation event. Where we could get you all together and just say thank you. Thank you for your business. Thank you for the pleasure of working with you all. We thought that, you know, if we found a fun spot and had good food, good drinks, people would come, and I'm just overwhelmed that all of you made time to come and be with us tonight. Thank you for that. We also, though, wanted tonight to present some information that we thought would be helpful, useful, and timely to you. And it was really last summer. It was last summer when we saw these prices happening that we said, okay, when it comes tax assessment time, there's going to be a lot of people that say, oh boy, what have we done? And came up with the idea, Keith, of asking you and your staff to come and be part of this and deliver some information to the group on how the process works. Before we dive into that, kind of really want to look at what's happened in the central Denver market in the last couple of years. The last time as property assessments went out, which was in the summer of 2000, well actually it went out in May of 2013, 2 years ago, but they were looking at this group of properties, this group of sales comps. As of June 30, 2012, when we looked back at the 6 months of sales prior to that, the average price was only $73,000, which was roughly the same number it had been in 2011 and in 2010, and we put out kind of word to you all that don't fear your tax assessments. The market hasn't moved that much yet. The next month, though, it took off. The second half of 2012, we went from 73 up to 102, and it has not stopped, nor has it shown any signs really of slowing down since then. When we look just simply at the 24 months of sales that are going to go into this year's assessments, it's these 4 quarters, or 4 half-year periods rather, where we left, again, the $73,000 mark and are now at almost $128,000 a unit. Knowing this has happened will take some of the shock off of the assessment letters that you get next week. But it's also important as you go through those assessment letters to know that the properties that everyone's using to compare your values, the properties you may want to use to protest, we want to match those up as best as possible. And Keith will talk about some of those factors that they focus on. That's where we ended this base period from the last. It's a 74% increase in average sales values. And good news is some things that we can remind ourselves, back in these sales that were happening in 2012 and before, very few renovated buildings were included. They were a lot of 1960s and earlier built properties that were very much in that as-is condition. What we've seen in the last year and a half have been some of those properties that you all bought, renovated, and have sold have inflated the market. And if you've got properties that are unrenovated, you want to make sure you're matching those up with unrenovated sales when you're coming up with your values this time around. But in this group, and as we look at what happened in the first half of 2014, again focusing just on Central Denver, we had over 30 sales that Kyle and I logged and looked at. Later tonight, we'll be sharing that information with you in books that you can take with you that catalog all these individual sales. But out of all of those, there were 2 sales between Broadway and Colorado Boulevard under $100,000 a unit. And it's just amazing to see what's happened in really just 3 short years. So the stakes are going to be high this year for your property valuations. More than ever, you're going to want to make sure that the assessments and new values that are given are accurate. And we're very pleased tonight to really have the authority on the matter with us in Keith Erffmeyer. He's brought several members of the staff with us tonight. I'll let you introduce them. But thank you, Greg and others, for coming tonight and being part of us. But let me introduce Keith. He's a guy I've known well for over 20 years, going back to when our wives taught elementary school together. Within the first year after Carrie and I were married, Keith and I got to know each other, and we've been friends ever since. Keith has devoted his entire professional career to the City and County of Denver Assessor's Office, starting as an intern in 1994, and then progressing to a senior level appraiser position and earning a certified general appraisal license. In 2005, he became the commercial section supervisor and later was promoted to the role of deputy assessor and chief appraiser in 2009. He was named acting assessor when Paul Jacobs retired a year ago. And at the end of 2014, Keith was named Denver's County Assessor. So please join me in welcoming my friend, Keith Erffmeyer.
Well, first of all, thank you for having me. It's really an honor, a privilege to be able to participate and hopefully provide some education, maybe provide some resources in terms of some individuals. Greg mentioned a client appreciation event. I consider it a taxpayer appreciation event, if we can call it that. We were at an event not too dissimilar from this not too long ago, and there's a lot of really positive news, like Greg expressed, and one of my brethren from Boulder County got up and said, "I guess I qualify as the buzzkill to all of this." So I'm going to try and provide a lot of education tonight on how we do things. I understand where there's probably a great deal of mystery behind how we do what we do. We're going to talk about kind of what to pay attention for when the notices come out. Quite honestly, it's possible some of you may already have them in your mailbox. I see some nods of heads, so okay. I do have staff strategically placed throughout just in case something goes awry, but before I start, Greg Fees in the back is one of our principal apartment valuers, and also April Roybal here, Jason Neary, and Kim Lust are also part of the team that I appreciate so much their knowledge and their passion for getting things right, and that's really what we're interested in. We don't have an interest in overvaluing people, quite honestly. It does us absolutely no good. So, without further ado, I'll start running through the slides. So, first question, I hope everybody can see that okay. How is residential real property valued for assessment purposes? So we've got what's known as a base year concept. And this is under Colorado law. We must appraise all real property every 2 years. I don't think that's a great mystery to you. I'm sure you all wait with anticipation every 2 years for this notice to come. That's important because this year, 2015, the property value, which we determine as the actual value, must reflect the valuation date of June 30th, 2014. I think Greg did a good job of establishing that as the date. Anything that's happened since then, quite honestly, I don't mean it this way, but we don't care about it in terms of the market. I think we can probably all agree the market hasn't gotten any worse since then, so I don't think that's a terrible problem for us this particular time around. But in declining markets, we wouldn't pay any attention to it. In appreciating markets, we also don't pay any attention to it. The base period that we use is the 24-month period preceding that. That's where our data comes from. And this is the box that Greg highlighted on the CoStar slide, and any other all information has to be collected from that base period. The assessment date is a little tricky. The assessment date is January 1 of each year. How the property physically stands as of January 1 is how we value it. However, we value it how it stands as of January 1 as if it were to be valued on June 30th. So if a property is undergoing renovation, or if something happens to that property, unfortunate, late in 2014, we would reflect that on the valuation. New construction is probably the best example I can give. If something's undergoing new construction, we will ascertain how far along it is as of January 1st, and we'll value it as if it, hopefully if we're correct, sold as of June 30th. One more thing, the market approach. We are required under Amendment 1, according to the Colorado Constitution, to consider the market approach only. For most residential property, that's not a big problem for us. Single-family residential, condominiums, townhomes, not a problem. With apartments, I wouldn't say it's a problem, but it gets a little confusing because we understand apartments are bought and sold based on income-producing potential. We understand that. Hopefully, however, the sales amounts reflect that income-producing potential, which would allow us to use the market approach to value those properties. We can, and at times we do, consider gross rent multipliers, competing properties, and the income producing comparability of those two properties in order to ascertain whether our market approach is correct. Kind of tricky, but we have to use the market approach. We have to use sales. And because of that, that's one of the reasons we put comparables on all the notices that go out in order to demonstrate to you what comparables we've actually chosen to place the final value on your property. We'll get more into that a little bit later as well. There's one thing I want everybody to remember. It's June 30th, 2014. That is the date of value. Gallagher Amendment. I'm guessing everybody's probably heard of the Gallagher Amendment by now. Not a whole lot of people know what it is. The Gallagher Amendment says that we need to collect 45% of the tax revenue in the state of Colorado from residential property. And we need to collect 55% of the revenue from commercial property. Commercial property, you can see on the scale there, is at 29%. That's set in state statute, statewide. Can't be changed? Well, I guess it could, but it would take a legislative action to do it. The residential 7.96 ratio, which has been in existence, boy, for about 10 years now, so long, in fact, that most people assume that it's set in state statute. That floats based on the statewide total valuation, which is reported to the State Division of Property Taxation at this time every year. A bill actually went to the legislature this morning to reapprove the residential ratio at 7.96% based on everything that collected statewide. The good news is this value, or this percentage, really can only go down. It would be highly unusual for that percentage to go up, primarily because there's more residential taxpayers than there are commercial taxpayers, and the legislature has figured that out. Apartments, residential. When this was put into place, apartments were put in the residential category, and they've been that way ever since. How are taxes counted? Notice the difference in taxes for residential versus non-residential property. It's a pretty good deal to be on the residential side of things, we'll just put it that way. So what is mass appraisal? Mass appraisal is what we do. I got about 25 appraisers, I got about 200,000 plus properties, so to get through all those, I can't do it one at a time, it's not going to happen. So we do mass appraisal, which is valuing a universe of properties as of a given date, June 30th, 2014, using standard methodology, employing common data, and allowing for statistical testing. So we're gonna walk through that a little bit. That's out of the IAAO, which is the International Association of Assessing Officers. I bet you didn't know that even existed. And yes, I am a member. Required. First step in our process, we verify sales. We are required to verify every transaction that occurs in Denver County, regardless of what it is. This time around, we verified about 25,000 property transactions over the 2-year period. Residential, condominiums, apartments, commercial, land, everything. Our staff, some of them that I pointed out to you, verify these. Their first step in the process is to either qualify them as arm's length or to disqualify them as being non-arm's length. I looked at the Appraisal Institute definition and kind of summarizing it. An arm's length transaction is one between unrated parties and under no duress. So that's kind of what we're looking for. Is it true? We get a transaction from the clerk and recorder's office. Was it between related parties? Yes, it's out. No? Okay. Well, was either side under duress? Did they have to sell? Did they have to buy? Any other variables in here that would otherwise cause the value or the price paid for that property to be unduly influenced, and we don't want that to taint our approval of sales, so we would disqualify. We are audited on what we qualify and disqualify. The state, actually all 64 counties are audited on what we qualify and disqualify, and we have to explain what we disqualify on a random sampling basis. Next step, if we call it good, we verify those characteristics against our database. We consider remodeling, basement finish, bath counts, bedroom counts, whether the property was distressed, whether negative external factors. We've got a database on every property in the whole county, and if we need to update it, we do. Was the unit in the basement finished or not? How many units are actually at the property? Did they combine 2 units into 1 unit? All of those things. We want to get the characteristics as right as we can before we move to the next step. Where do we get this information? We get it from MLS. We get it from, actually I omitted CoStar from this property. We get a lot of information from CoStar. Carrie was out here somewhere. Apartment Insights, information, plug for Carrie. We interview people. Greg is diligent, honestly, about calling people. If something pops up as he's reviewing the sale, where he goes, this looks weird to me. Something's off here, I need to call somebody. We send out letters to people, we get transfer declarations, those funky things that you fill out, the brokers more or less fill out for you before you get to the closing. We look at those. Historical records, permits, has anything been fixed on this property in the last 5 years? What's really going on? That helps us paint a picture of snapping a picture of this property at its time of sale, so we can use that information to help value the universe of the property. So a little bit about valuation models. This is about where people's eyes roll in the back of their heads, and oh boy, we're going to get into some calculus here or something like that. I'll try and keep it at a pretty high level for you. These are math models. We call them value models. They're intended to mirror the motivations of you all. What's motivating you to buy this property or sell this property? What makes you pay the price that you paid for this? And I'm not just talking about apartments, quite frankly. Most of you probably own homes, condos, and townhomes as well. What's motivating people to meet in the middle and establish a sale price where both sides say, I'll buy that from you, or I'll sell that to you for that amount. We utilize quantitative and qualitative data. Quantitative being number of bedrooms, number of bathrooms, number of units, square footage. Qualitative, we have quality ratings, grade A, grade B, grade C. We can apply obsolescence as needed, conditional problems, functional problems, economic surrounding problems that otherwise influence the property's desirability and saleability. It can be, could be tabular, linear, nonlinear, any other type for observable property characteristics. Tabular just being how many count up, number of bathrooms is probably the best example of that. Linear being year of construction, it could be anywhere from 1880 to 2014. So the point of all this is we have a tremendous amount of statistics and characteristics that we can put in and build valuation models. How do we develop those models? First, we stratify the sale properties. Appraising apartments, honestly, is one of the bigger challenges that we have, and probably the biggest, honestly, challenge that we have in developing a market approach. Houses, Wash Park, although challenging to appraise, is a little more homogeneous than apartments when you look at them citywide. You get everything from duplexes to probably complexes well over 1,000 units. So we have to cut them somehow, some way to get like properties together in order to build a valuation model. If you throw everything in together, it is a mess and it will not work. So we have 3 apartment models. Essentially, we've got what we call apartment model 1, which is 2 to 4 units. We've got apartment model 2, which is essentially your kind of mid-rise to even high-rise. A lot of what you all are familiar with, probably in central Denver. And then we've got model 3, which is basically your PBGs that are kind of not quite in the suburbs, but on the outer ring of Denver primarily. And that's how we stratify them. So that's how we group them. The best way for me to put it is 2 to 4 units in model 1, PBGs are in model 3, and everything else is in model 2. This is an important one, actually. We have to time trend to June 30th of 2014. So we talked about the 2-year period that we use data from. Before we can even really start, we got to trend every sale, in this case up, to the end of the base period in order to use that as the launching point for our modeling process. That is the absolute first step. We need to take time out of the equation, so to speak, by getting every sale transaction up to that point in time. And I'm going to display a little bit more on that in just a minute. We perform something called multiple regression analysis, which is, this way I can put it, kind of like making sausage out of the statistics I was talking about earlier. And we'll talk about that one too. And then we review what we've done. Now we're not blind to it. We review it. We review outliers as we're going through this particular modeling process. We review the coefficients to make sure they make sense. We don't want to have a coefficient that is a negative for parking. That doesn't make intuitive sense. That a property would contribute negative value if it has garages, for example. So we review all that. So I'm going to break that down a little bit in just a moment. We do a lot of statistical testing to evaluate how well our models are performing. And I mentioned the state auditor previously. The state auditor is particularly interested in that. They look at what's known as a median sales ratio. So if we took 100 sales, they're going to look at the median ratio, which is our value compared to the sales price, and that has to be within a certain statistical threshold. You also look at something known as a coefficient of dispersion, which is if I have these 100 sales, even if the one in the middle is where it needs to be, the rest of them can't be dispersed from that central tendency. We're audited on that. If we don't make that, they send it back and they say, try again. And that does not go over very well with me in my office. They do that for all 64 counties. This is actually model 1. So one of the first kind of sub-stratifications we do is we break up the city into, well, how many of these are there? 32 geographical model 1 areas. So these are the 2 to 4 units, which may or may not be quite as interesting. These are the model 2 ones. So there's, 11, 13 maybe of these. And I'm going to go back and forth between them. We stratify model 1, we see more colors, more shapes, breaking down much more than model 2. And my guess is that a lot of you are in kind of this model here. This geographical area here, there might even be some south of the highway down here, but I think predominantly we're talking about the stuff that's in here. You see the 2-year base period across the bottom of the screen? We chart the ratios, these are median ratios by month through the base period. And we draw a trend line through it. And that tells us what that equates to be in terms of a time trend per month. And if you look up here, it's over 1% a month. So our trend line isn't too dissimilar, I think, from, I remember reading something from Kerry a while back where he was talking about 25%. So we're a little above that. I don't know what it is off the top of my head, 28, 30% maybe over that 2-year period. So we take, if a sale occurs at this point in time, we will count the number of months. Let's say it's 20 months for sake of argument. We'll take 20 months times the percent per month. We'll add that to the sale price to get to what we call the time-adjusted sale price. Really makes sense. If there's any questions on that, see me afterwards. We'll go through graph. In a declining market, absolutely. Yes. Yeah, the tail end. It's a good question. I won't get into it too much, but sometimes if we have a really dynamic 2-year period, we can end up with what we call a spline, which is where you can see an entrance trend. 9/11 happens, and then you see it go like this. With that at the end, we've got stuff up, and there's not enough there for us to say that things dip dramatically again. If that makes sense. Good question. But so I mentioned multiple regression analysis. We do residential marketing via this. It's a statistical technique that we use to analyze data in order to predict a variable. This is almost a definition of it, such as market value from known other variables. So we've got all this data: number of bedrooms, number of baths, square footage, where it's located, what year it was built, are there any units in the basement, what condition it is, and go on and on. And we know how much it sold for. And we got about, 100, 200, 300 of these. So we put it all in. Multiple regression analysis is a technique that says, based on that, we think each square foot is worth this much in this particular location. Each bath, each bedroom, each year of construction or age component, if that makes sense. So we try and develop what we call a coefficient for every characteristic on these properties. Those coefficients are developed by allowing it to do a best fit. It's a very complicated computer program that says, based on all of this, this is what I think needs to happen in order to get that median ratio and the coefficient dispersion as low as possible. This is the best fit based on this statistical set. Those coefficients can, I mentioned this earlier, they can be constrained if it's not logical. If something's way out of whack, it just doesn't make sense, we can write that in, and that forces value elsewhere in our particular model. We do this over and over and over and over again. We run it, we look at the outliers, which are the ones to the extremes. We look at those properties and say, why isn't this fitting? What is wrong? There's something about this that doesn't make sense. Greg will call, Greg will look into the transaction. Something's not right about this. And we'll just do that over and over and over again until we get it as good as we think we possibly can, or frankly, we run out of time and have to go ahead and start with the next step in the process. So these are some sample Model 2 coefficients from this year. They won't mean anything to you unless I explain it. Net fee per unit is 40. That represents $40 a foot. Seems low, right? We'll get to why that's a little low. Basement square foot per unit, that's a minus 17. What that signifies is out of all the square footage in a particular property, if some of that's in the basement, we need to lower that particular comparable, that coefficient, so it would subtract from it. Semi-basement, same thing, low, not as low as a full below grade basement. These are different areas. I just picked 2, 4, 5, 6 of them off that particular map. These are either negative 24, negative 5, 50 positive adjustments by location. So depending on where that property is located in the maps that I showed a few slides ago, it will adjust for all those. And again, I'm not showing all the coefficients. There's quite a few of them. Grade B gets positive adjustment. Grade D gets a negative adjustment. Parking, 3,000 per enclosed covered parking space. So we do this. These are some of our results, and these are some of the coefficients that we developed for 2015. The C term is an important one. The C term is where it all starts. The reason $40 a square foot is so low is we started $70,199 and some odd cents per unit before we even start making adjustments. And that's kind of the base. It's almost like the foundation before we start building the rest of the regression value for a particular property. So, any questions on that? I know it's a little bit of a difficult concept. You've gotten an NOV from us for residential property. You've probably seen one of these before. This is a comp sheet, 13. I had a hard time really getting it. I hope it's not too fuzzy for you guys. 1362 or 3 Claytons.
You're sitting back there.
Oh, okay, there you go. There's your NOV. Luckily, they bought it. In the base period, it shows up as comp number 1. So we're comparing, we picked 3 comparables. We're comparing this along with 2 other properties, 1335 Monroe and 3005 East 14th Avenue. Are all being compared to this particular property. I won't go through double the details on the map because you've probably got far better things to do than that. But down at the bottom, you will see a market estimate per unit, a weighted value per unit, and this is probably as fuzzy as all get out, so you probably can't see it. And what we do is we take these properties, these 3, this one being the subject itself, so it won't even adjust except but for time. And we compare these, number 2 and number 3, to the first one, and anywhere there's differences, square footage, bath counts, bed counts per unit, covered parking, all those things. We adjust the time adjusted sale price of these particular comparables to the subject to get to what's known as it's a characteristic adjusted sale per unit price down at the bottom. We do some internal math to finally reconcile to a value on here. In this case, it's about 1,400,000 and some odd thousand, and I'm hoping that's pretty dang close to I would say this about this particular thing. If you get your NOV, and you really want to know much more about the nuts and bolts, how this all reconciles at the bottom, or you want to know tonight, I'd be happy to help you, I would call our office. And Greg, Kim, Jason, April would be happy to walk you through how this all compiles down to deed. I think the point of all this is to at least try to demonstrate there's a bit of a method to our madness. We hope we're doing it as accurately as possible. And furthermore, we're providing comparables that hopefully provide some kind of evidence of how we can operate. So median changes, what's happening? Some people have already got their notices of value. I had a press conference earlier today with the news media, and along with 6 other county assessors, we announced a lot of this. So in Denver County, property type, if you own a residence in Denver County, the median change is around 29%, condominiums are around 33%, row houses are around 27%. Generally speaking, what we've seen is the higher percent increases are in some of our historically lower value neighborhoods. Essentially what they did, they really bottomed out. I mean, they get hit hard by the recession. Property goes from say 100,000 to 50,000, now it's come back up to 100,000. The increase on the upswing is very dramatic percentage-wise. So in residential, some of our lower value properties are coming up the most percentage-wise, not dollar-wise, but percentage-wise. The commercial for you, CBD office buildings, 40%, 50%, 60% increases aren't unusual throughout downtown. Warehouses, our median increase is around 23%. The demand for space to grow, marijuana, quite frankly, fueled a lot of upswing in the warehouse market. Retail, interestingly, pretty soft, really, probably one of our lowest segments at barely over 10%. Hotel motels, if you've read the papers, they've performed very strongly during the base period. Small offices were also about 20%. And probably what you mostly came for. 1 to 4 units, and one is interesting. A 1-unit apartment would simply be just a single unit above a retail building or something like that. So we got to put them somewhere, so we put them in there. Median change around 28%. Apartments, and I broke them down a little differently than Model 2, Model 3. What I did is more by price. 5+ units under $5 million, the median increase was around 46%. Same thing, 5+ units over $5 million assets were around 56% increase. So we're hovering around 50%, which is short of Greg's 74%, so I think we've done pretty good.
I was trying to make it.
But Greg's right, a lot of what's sold in it'd be the first half of 2012 was probably some rougher stuff. So it's kind of skews the 74% number. I like our numbers. So those are medians. Again, those are medians. It does vary by property, certainly, but those are the stats. A little bit about appeals. In Denver, we have what's known as the alternate procedure. So you get your NOV, you look at it, you're like, man, that damn key. I listened to him for all that time, I learned about regression analysis, and he's still stuck it to me. How do you appeal? Well, first question I'd tell you to ask yourself is why are you appealing? What is it? Is it the increase? Is it the anticipation of what the taxes might be? Or is it that the value is just simply off? If the value's off, tell us as much as you possibly can about why you feel that way. Condition, the property next door, something or other, the traffic's gotten worse, anything. It's something that helps us understand why you feel that way. I can't tell you how many appeals we've looked at over the years. It's just value too high, went up too much, something like that. And that doesn't get us a lot of places. We really want to know why you feel that way. I mentioned the 24-month base period, ended in June 30th. I also mentioned the assessment date of January 1st, 2015. That's how the property sat as of January 1st, 2015. So we're 2 days away from here when notices go out. In fact, they already have. If you're going to appeal to us, we need it back by June 1st. We need it back within a month. You can appeal online, you can mail it to us, you can bring it in if you really want to take the trip downtown, but we need it by June 1st, one way or another. We have until the end of August to respond. my staff, our staff will review literally thousands of appeals, and we will respond by the end of August. We have to, by law. If you get that back and you still say, they must have not even read this, they're still off. You have 2 weeks. You have until the middle of September, September 15th, to appeal to the County Board of Equalization. If you do that, we don't decide, a hearing officer then decides. You come in, you tell him or her why you feel like you're overassessed, all the things that we're hoping to get from you in the first place, and we'll respond with what we know and let them decide. They will decide, they will make a recommendation to the board. They're independent, completely independent. They're paid by the city. That's about the extent. You got to pay them, they don't do it for free. We have to mail a notice back to you by November 1st. By November 1st, we have to mail you their decision. That gives us about a month to clean up the mess, and then my office, I certify to all the taxing districts by December 10th. This is my total value, this is our total value in your district. Now you guys go figure out your mill levy to collect what you need to collect under the budget. If you're still not satisfied, there's one more level, and that's the State Board of Assessment appeal. Typically, it's also district court inviting arbitration. Most individuals choose the State Board of Assessment appeals. That is, just as it sounds, it's a state board. There's usually 2, sometimes 3 members. It's, I would say, quasi-judicial in nature. There's testimony given, cross-examination, that kind of stuff. It's a little more formal. Honestly, we'd love to solve it for you in the first step if you got a problem. That way you can pay the right taxes way up front. You don't want to go through that. That takes a year or 2 to go through. If you're gonna protest, I got some do's and don'ts. Do consider the market value. I'm sorry, don't consider the current market. Do remember the date of value. Part of that. That's not a concern. I appreciate it. Don't protest the taxes. First of all, you don't even know what they're going to be yet. Do consider the value. Don't consider the rate of increase. Do review, please, property characteristics. Don't simply say the value is too high. Do provide evidence. Sales, photos, descriptions, issues, any of them that are negative to property, estimates of cost to cure, rent rolls, etc. One more thing, property taxes. I must certify by December 10th. Taxing authorities then use those certified values, and they follow all kinds of statutory and voter-approved measures to set the mill rates no later than December 15th. They get 5 whole days to do this. What they do is they take our values, they've already established what they can and what they're allowed to collect under TABOR, 2A, DPS, all kinds of different funds, voter-approved measures that affect these things. And they say, we can collect this much. The assessor tells me the value is this much. There's the mill levy. That's what we need to do in order to turn the assessor's values into a tax amount. Those tax bills are then delivered, obviously in January. By all are almost excited to get the tax bills as you are to get the notices of value. Thank you, honestly, for the opportunity to present that to you. I'll take any questions, except for Carrie. No.
Thanks, Steve. Awesome presentation.
Thank you.
Appreciate all the data. I know you can't know yet what the mill levy is going to be or what it's going to do, but I did get an indication from another county how much they thought the mill levy would go down based on where values are today. And I understand the values are going to change for the appeal process. But you have a general idea how much values have gone up. So do you have any kind of guess how much mill levies have gone up?
I really don't know, honestly. And Denver's DPS in particular is a very complicated issue. I'll approach that answer in a couple different ways. First of all, 2A, if you guys remember 2A passing, if you're in Denver, you've hopefully voted on it. 2A is about 25% of the Denver levy. 2A, even though we debruised, it recapped what we can collect at 6%. Another way of saying that is 25% of your levy is protected at no more than a 6% rate of increase. And that's what goes to the city. The other portion that we collect is not capped, and DPS is kind of a hybrid in there. The best way for me to probably summarize the answer is that when you're looking at rates like this, taxes are absolutely going to go up. I don't know how else to paint that picture. The rate at which they're going to go up, I will say, will not be proportional to the rate of the value increase. So, if values went up 46.3%, the tax bill should not go up 46.3%. The mill levy will have to come down. I don't know much more than that at this point in time, how much it will come down, but it's safe to say it's going to. Maybe it's just my conservatism. I hope it comes down, a lot, but I'm not anticipating it to be anywhere near 46%.
If we get an assessment that we feel is high-based, how do we tell if it's based on the condition of the building, and how do we determine which factors or coefficients made your determination, and how would you put together a rational response to the testing?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'll back up to the comp sheet, call the comp sheet real quickly. Pretty much everything that I mentioned earlier is part of building what's known as the MRA. So it's really hard for me to say on a characteristic by characteristic basis how much each of the comparables adjust to the subject property. And that was probably more of the second part of your particular question. Whether or not a property's been adjusted for condition, I'm pointing here, there's some things here, I apologize if it's hard to read, it might be easier for you than me. There's a physical, a functional, and locational percentages here. If there were any adjustments, they would show up right here. They would be expressed in percentages, negative. Generally 5, 10, 15, 20%, something of that nature. So if you own a property that's been distressed and you've maybe told us about it in years past and we've adjusted for that distressed nature, if it's reflected here, we've simply been carrying that forward. Now, if we have reason to believe that you fixed it up, or you see some permits come through that maybe address the nature of your concerns in your original permit, we might strip that off and say, hey, it looks to us like that problem's been cured. So if you're not sure if you're getting any kind of obsolescence adjustment, that's the place to look. Is that answered? At least the part. Okay. Yes, ma'am.
Do you look at the date that comments are
Yeah, we would be much more concerned about the date that they're signed off. And whether or not they're signed off by January 1st is kind of a key thing, going back to the date. If somebody pulls permits in October to do an extensive renovation, they're in the middle of it in January, we're not going to do anything about that until the following January, when hopefully they're all done.
So what do you do when you get your tax assessment and there are no comparables?
Call our office.
And will someone sit down with you to go over? What set of circumstances would cause that?
To not have comparables?
Yeah.
They're pretty rare with these particular properties. One example, the best example I can think of off the top of my head is anything that's a mixed use where it's got some commercial component and some residential component, because there's two things going on the property.
Okay.
Rather than putting one of them on there on the notice of value, we just say call our office. If you want to know more about what's going on. I can tell you that behind the scenes on every residential property, because by law we have to, there's going to be some comparables.
Interesting.
So we can absolutely provide them. I can't think of hardly any residential property where we wouldn't have comparables available, even if they're not on the notice of value. That's the most obvious example I can think of. Sir?
I have a question on the real property transfer declaration form. I've seen the thousands of closings, and I will always watch the builder explain personal property section.
I bet that's fun.
So what do you really want to know on that? Do you really want to know they have 17 range ovens, 17 refrigerators, and apartment square footage,
As much as we can, yes. You'd be surprised how many people will put an amount there with little or no explanation. That just doesn't make sense relative to the value being paid for the property. Buying this property for $1 million, and I have $100,000 worth of personal property. when it starts to get out of a reasonable range, given the age of the property and the price being paid, then we start to look at it a little crossways, like really, you got $100,000 of ovens and such in this particular property. So my suggestion is outline it as best you can. Now, we don't need to know the age of every single oven in there. But anything that you can do to help us understand that allows us to confidently make that deduction. Wait a minute.
What's the aggregate sum increase in valuations?
For Denver County?
Where was it, or approximately?
The aggregate from, this would be a comparison over 2014, 28 point something %. That includes houses, office buildings, apartments, everything that you saw on that kind of summary slide that I looked at. Our real property assessed value is about 28% greater than it was in 2014. Now, I didn't mention it, it's probably not of great interest, but we still have personal property values to do, which we'll do this summer. And the state assesses certain properties for us. CenturyLink, Xcel Energy, United Airlines are done very differently than anything that we've talked about here tonight. So those values aren't even set yet, so I don't know for sure.
What is the nominal amount? You're not sure all of the property in Denver County was bought all.
Oh boy. Trying to think of what it. I know the assessed value, which is after the 7.96 and 29% is applied, is in of real property is about 13 billion. So divided, I don't know, 130 billion.
And is it 50-50?
That's a good question. Last time I looked, it was around 43 or so % commercial, 41, 42, 43, somewhere there, 50, high 50s residential. So and we're probably by far and away the county that has the greatest percentage of commercial property. I mean, by far and away. Yes, sir.
Well, I'm an EE contractor, and I have one customer that says I'm needing a permit. I just like simply pay us $100, $100 there, which we do, but you guys, like the type 9 and 11 permit, these small amount permits go to the assessor's office for evaluation. Is there like a threshold?
They do go to us, but we don't pay any attention. I mean, we've got 25 people, so we don't, we'll chase off, or primarily if we see something structural going on, which is be a #1 permit, or if we add up all the permits and that relationship to the property value is significant, then we'll probably review what's going on, but stuff like that,
Water heaters.
yeah. Any other questions? I probably way over my time.
Yes, how much do you consider the rent roll in the valuation? I know there's statements.
It's a good question.
We have a commercial property that has several storefronts.
Yep.
And they're micro businesses.
Okay.
I mean, you can't walk in and say, oh, by the way, your rent's more than about 40%. For instance, one unit is 193 square feet. So how much
is it a residential unit that's underneath or commercial?
It's a commercial.
So on mixed-use properties, we will break out the commercial component from the residential component. We will value them separately from one another entirely. Commercial will actually do an income approach on that. We'll estimate rents, vacancies, expenses, and capitalize that into a value. On the residential, then we'll do kind of what we described here.
So it's worth providing a rent roll.
Yeah. If you're concerned, and if you're concerned about how the total value breaks down between commercial and residential, we have that. And if you just want to address one portion or the other, if you're concerned, say about the commercial portion, we can do that as well.
So my question to what you just said was, what if it's a gross, even in a commercial situation, what if it's gross rent that you charge versus triple net or something along those lines? I mean, that can have a huge impact
Yeah, we'll
on your actual net income.
yes, and that's what we're trying to get to. So if we've got a gross rent with expenses, we're trying to get to a net operating income before interest, mortgage expenses, all that kind of stuff, and then we'll capitalize that into value. So if it's 18 gross or 12 net, when we get to the same place, that's all that matters.
Okay, good, thanks.
We have time for maybe one more question. Anybody else have a question for Keith? I didn't want to deflate the room. I guess there's no more questions.
Thank you very much.
I think it goes without saying that we need to say thank you to Keith. Keith was very gracious with his time today. He has a schedule that I think would rival Taylor Swift's today. He's been at press conferences, like he was saying, with the Denver Business Journal, Denver Post, etc. He had a meeting at BOMA this morning and was still gracious enough to come to our event. As Greg and I described, we wanted to create a situation where we could have a really nice event with some cocktails, some food to say thank you to our clients, but we also wanted it to be informative because the reality of our business as brokers is we get to work with our clients on an individual basis for a short period of time, and then we continue to follow up with you incessantly, I'm sure, as you think. But really what we want to do is we want to add value. We feel like that's our job in between sales, is to make sure that we continue to inform our clients. Greg and I really have only worked together for 3 years. One of the folks that's in the room here was actually the catalyst to that brokerage relationship. In 2009, I listed a building that Greg brought the buyer to, and that's where it all started. And then we actually started to work together in 2012. And we couldn't believe that it's been since 2012 and we've actually gotten all of our clients into a room to say thank you for everything that you do, for all the value you add to our business and our lives. And we really want to say we appreciate you. It's been a pleasure serving you, and we look to continue to do that for the next couple of decades, right, Greg? All right. So Courtney and I have little kids. We've got a 5-year-old and 2 4-year-olds. It's a busy household. Proper etiquette when you go to a party for a 5-year-old or a 4-year-old is you get a gift bag. You get something that's going to be given to you at the door. And so we've got a packet of information that you'll all be receiving as you leave. And the packet has information that will help you if you decide to protest your taxes. It's divided in 2 ways. The front part of the packet is all of the comps in chronological order, and they're numbered. The middle part of the packet and the back part of the packet take those same comps, divide them by neighborhood, and then they also divide them by property type. So if you're one of those owners that owns everything in Capitol Hill, you can zero in to that neighborhood section. If you're an owner that owns an outside walkout, a vintage building, a center hallway, maybe a new build, you might want to go back to the section that divides it by style. So take a look at that information. That's our gift to you, but really what we want to invite you to do is, this is going to be a very tight window, May 1st to June 1st. 2 years ago, we had a really long and prolonged situation where we had it was 5 months or so to do your protest. It's going to be a lot faster, it's going to be a lot more aggressive. The people that are in this room have chosen to come here, and we want to give you a gift of 1 hour of free consultation on the inside and out of every comp that might pertain to your building. We would invite you either to our office or may come to see you depending on the situation, but that's something that is exclusive to the people that are here in the room tonight. The event has been, I think, a huge success. I really want to say thank you to everybody that's here. Kudos again go to Valerie Latham and Anna Malnati. All of the planning that was done here certainly was not done by me. I'm part of the welcoming committee, not the planning committee. So, and I think anyone who's worked with me knows that. And I just want to say thank you so much, Valerie and Anna, for putting this event together. Greg, for all the wonderful things that you've taught me in our couple of years of working together. I look forward to doing it for another couple of decades. Thanks everybody for coming. The bar will open back up.